Welcome back. This week I'm talking about Luke chapter 14 in my text for the week, and my reflection is on the nature of Jesus's discussion of humility and to make oneself low. And to do that, I'm going to do some background on Luke 14. The first thing to notice is that most of Luke 14 takes place at a party that a Pharisee throws for a community on a Sabbath. So this is a Saturday afternoon, presumably after some sort of worship service. Um, the Pharisee invites a number of people back to his house for a banquet. Jesus is among that group of people who is invited. There is no clear reason why Jesus is invited. It could be that Jesus had enough prestige to be included in the community that was inviting him. It could also be that because he is a pilgrim on a journey to Jerusalem, this was considered practical hospitality. In other words, Luke chapter 9 tells us that Jesus sets his face towards Jerusalem. That is the beginning of his pilgrimage to Jerusalem before his last Passover celebration. And it might be that this Pharisee, seeing a number of pilgrims making the journey to Jerusalem, this Pharisee and other leaders in this particular town and this community felt the obligation to show hospitality to travelers, and Jesus was a part of this group. Either way, we don't know. We don't know whether it's his fame that precedes him or if he is just the beneficiary of local hospitality. Either way, Jesus is invited into the house of a Pharisee to eat a banquet for probably just a typical Saturday afternoon meal. Now, on the way to this dinner, Jesus notices a man who is swollen. We don't know why. It says dropsy. There many medical conditions can cause these specific symptoms, but Jesus notices this man and takes the time to use this situation to confront the Pharisees. He heals the man, and he asks the Pharisees, asks these religious leaders, is this ethical? Is this moral? Is this a part of our law? What does our law say when the duties to honor the Sabbath run up against the needs of our brothers and sisters? This would have been a common question. This would have been something that was debated by the Jewish community then, and to some degree we still debate over similar issues today. How do we as Christians respond in within the world? How do our ideals shake out in our priority list for the days, and how do we then use those priority lists to respond to the needs of our current time? This is nothing new. And what the storyteller, what Luke wants us to recognize is that Jesus, throughout Luke 14, is going to prioritize humanity, and especially those members of society who are in the lowest social structures. His opponents, Jesus's opponents, these Pharisees, do not prioritize the people. They prioritize the social norms of the day, the social customs, such as keeping to Sabbath requirements, which say no work, and healing for non-life-threatening injuries is considered work, even though Jesus's work brings this man into the fellowship of the community. The priority of keeping the Sabbath for these Pharisees trumps that, and everything about Jesus is going to say, no, 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 no. Your worship is good. Your keeping of the Sabbath is good. All these things are good. You're just over prioritizing them in a way that belittles and belittles people and makes them insignificant. And part of the reason for this is that the Jews of Jesus' day, much in some ways like we do today, prioritized a social structure. Theirs was much more rigid. It was a Roman social structure that had filtered through most of the Mediterranean, most of the Roman Empire at the time, that really held to prioritizing and privileging wealth and social status. These kinds of banquets were meant to be thrown for guests who would then in turn respond by inviting that host to their own banquet. So these were always reciprocal relationships. One host would invite another person, and then that person would turn around and invite the host back. Gift giving, all of these practices fit into a rigid hierarchy, a rigid system in the Roman world, where you were elevated or demoted in the social class based on what you could give and provide for people around you. It was an extremely rigid system that honored certain people and neglected others based on what they had and what they did not have. And while America today does not have the same rigidity to our social structures, we very much do have a class system that separates people who are at the top end from the people who are at the bottom end. We are not a melting pot that the myth of America kind of wants to teach us. We very much hold to societies and social structures that keep us isolated, and that is what Luke 14 is all about. It's about Jesus saying, listen, when you are invited to these social events, don't try to sit at the best tables. Go and intentionally sit at the worst tables. When you are hosting these events, don't simply invite friends and family. Invite the lowest. And again, to us that seems a little weird, because when we hold parties, we invite friends and family because those are the people we know. But imagine this is more of a setting like you would see in politics, or maybe a country club, something where social status means something, and your invitation is based on who you are. So you wouldn't just invite friends and family; you would invite the social, the social in crowd, the betters of the community. You would invite the people who could do favors for you. These are the people that typically got invites and typically got the best seats at the party. What Jesus is saying is, don't worry about those people. Associate with the low, the people who are outcast. And when you are elevated, bring them up with you. And it's curious to note that the words that Jesus uses here are very similar to the words in Mary's song in Luke 1. That the idea that God saw Mary, who was of low social standing, low significance, and elevated her by allowing her to participate in the work of Jesus. That's Jesus is his language here echoes that language that Mary uses. And so we should be very quick to notice that and to say, what Jesus is calling us to do is exactly what God did with Mary, and we should respond. We should respond to others like God responded to Mary. We should see them in their social setting. We should see them and help to elevate them out of their low social setting if we have a higher social setting. This is not simply humility in this passage is not simply about kind of downplaying my achievements or downplaying my abilities. In fact, that kind of language isn't even in this section. It is simply about prioritizing social status and how we should not do that. Jesus will first criticize the guests for the way they respond to the host's invitation, then criticize the hosts for who they invite. And then he goes on in the next paragraph, beyond what I'm really looking at this week, he goes on to talk about how God hosts a wedding feast, and how people who are probably of adequate social standing to participate, they decline the host's invitation. And so the host because the host has been declined, he goes out and looks for the low, looks for the poor, and elevates them to a status and demotes the people whose priorities were not with the hosts. And it's meant to help us think about how we get sometimes focused on our own priorities in life, our own goings on, our own world, our needs. And if you look at the people who reject the host's invitation in that section, that's what they're doing. They're looking at their own needs, their own priorities, and not focused on the host. And because of that, they're left out of the banquet. It's a warning to us that our self-centeredness is our pride, and that is the biggest hindrance to us when it comes to entering into God's feast. Anyway, I hope that blesses you today. As always, if you have questions or comments that you'd like to share, I encourage you to let me know. I enjoy hearing the feedback from people who watch these videos. It's good to know. I hope that this touched you today. And until we meet again, God bless.